Here's how the whole thing came to light. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection, better known as CBP, runs routine screenings at major entry points for imported goods. At 4 major ports, Los Angeles, Houston, Savannah, and Miami, CBP flagged some shipping containers from Indonesia that set off alarms for cesium-137. That's not something you expect to find in a container of frozen shrimp. The FDA stepped in immediately, collecting samples and running radionuclide analyses, which basically test for radioactive isotopes. Out of several samples, 1 breaded shrimp sample tested positive for cesium-137. That was enough to raise serious concerns, even though the other samples didn't confirm contamination. Consumers often ask, should I stop eating shrimp altogether because of this? The short answer is no. You don't need to give up shrimp. What you should do is stay informed about recalls. If the FDA or Walmart provides specific lot numbers or product details, check your freezer. If your bag of shrimp matches the recall notice, don't eat it. Return it to the store for a refund. If it doesn't match, you're fine. Recalls are a normal part of the food system, and they're designed to protect you. The presence of a recall doesn't mean all shrimp is unsafe. It means the system of checks and balances is doing its job. Another aspect to keep in mind is the sheer complexity of global food supply chains. Most of the shrimp Americans eat isn't caught in the Gulf of Mexico anymore. It's farmed or processed overseas, especially in countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. That means multiple checkpoints: farming, processing, packaging, shipping, importing, and finally retail. At any one of those stages, problems can occur. The FDA's job is to monitor imports, but the responsibility also extends to the countries that export to the U.S. That's why this case is sparking conversations not only in Washington, but also in Jakarta, where Indonesian regulators are under pressure to investigate and reassure global buyers. Let's also consider the communication side. In today's digital age, news of radioactive shrimp spreads fast, sometimes faster than the full facts. That's why it's important to rely on updates from the FDA, CBP, and trusted retailers. Rumors can spiral out of control and make the situation sound worse than it actually is. Remember, to date, no contaminated shrimp has been confirmed in U.S. stores. What's happening now is a precautionary response, and as soon as more details are confirmed, public advisories will be updated. It's a real-time process, and transparency is key to keeping consumers calm and informed. So, to wrap this up, the FDA is investigating shrimp imports from Indonesia after cesium-137 was detected in shipping containers, with 1 sample testing positive. Walmart has been advised to recall certain lots of raw frozen shrimp, even though no contaminated product has been confirmed in commerce. The risk to the public right now is low, but the situation highlights the importance of food safety vigilance, international cooperation, and consumer awareness. If you shop at Walmart or eat shrimp regularly, keep an eye on official recall notices. And remember, these safeguards exist to protect you. Food safety stories like this remind us that what ends up on our dinner table is connected to a massive global network, and sometimes that network uncovers surprises we never expected. Now here's where it gets complicated. When contamination is detected, even if it's just 1 sample, U.S. regulators have to treat the entire shipment with caution. According to FDA officials, all containers or products that tested positive or even raised an alert were denied entry into the country. That means they never reached store shelves or restaurants. But, and this is the big but, other shipments from the same Indonesian company, PT Bahari Makmur Sejati, also known as BMS Foods, had already made it past inspections. Those shipments didn't trigger radioactive alerts, but they were imported around the same time. That overlap is what led the FDA to recommend Walmart recall certain lots of Great Value brand raw frozen shrimp. Now, here's where it gets complicated. When contamination is detected, even if it's just one sample, U.S. regulators have to treat the entire shipment with caution. According to FDA officials, all containers or products that tested positive or even raised an alert were denied entry into the country. That means they never reached store shelves or restaurants. But, and this is the big but, other shipments from the same Indonesian company, PT Bahari Makmur Sejati, also known as BMS Foods, had already made it past inspections. Those shipments didn't trigger radioactive alerts, but they were imported around the same time. That overlap is what led the FDA to recommend Walmart recall certain lots of Great Value brand raw frozen shrimp. For consumers, this is unsettling. Think about it. Shrimp is one of the most popular seafood items in the U.S. According to industry data, Americans eat over 1 billion pounds of shrimp every year, much of it imported. Walmart, being one of the country's largest retailers, is a go-to spot for frozen seafood. So, when the FDA connects the dots between radioactive detection at ports and shrimp already sitting in Walmart's freezers, that creates a ripple effect of concern. Even though no contaminated product has officially been confirmed in the marketplace, the potential risk is enough for a recall recommendation. It's a classic example of regulators choosing caution over complacency. So let's talk about cesium-137. What is it? And why is it so concerning? Cesium-137 is a radioactive isotope that doesn't naturally occur in significant amounts. It's created through nuclear reactions, like those in nuclear power plants, or as a byproduct of nuclear weapons testing decades ago. The problem with cesium-137 is that it can remain in the environment for a very long time, with a half-life of about 30 years. Exposure in high enough doses can increase the risk of cancer, and while trace amounts exist in soil and food worldwide due to past nuclear activities, regulators watch closely for spikes that signal unnatural contamination. The FDA's monitoring is specifically designed to catch these out-of-place isotopes before they pose a widespread health risk. Here's another key point. The FDA clarified that so far, testing hasn't shown confirmed contaminated products in commerce. That means consumers aren't being told to panic, but they are being told to be cautious. If a product has even a possibility of exposure to unsanitary or unsafe conditions, U.S. food laws kick in. Under those laws, products that appear to have been prepared, packed, or held under insanitary conditions can be flagged as unsafe. Even if contamination hasn't been confirmed in every sample, it's a protective measure, not a declaration that every single bag is radioactive. Now let's zoom in on Walmart's role here. The company reportedly received shipments of raw frozen shrimp from this Indonesian supplier after the initial detection of cesium-137 by CBP. The shipments they received didn't raise alarms during inspections, but because of the timing and overlap, the FDA recommended Walmart recall those products just in case. Walmart's Great Value line is one of the largest private label food brands in the U.S., and any recall involving that brand tends to grab national attention. For Walmart, this isn't just about one seafood item. It's about consumer trust and brand integrity. Behind the scenes, the FDA is working with Indonesian regulatory authorities to figure out how this happened in the first place. How does cesium-137 end up connected with shrimp shipments? Was it environmental contamination at the processing facility? Was it something in the shipping containers themselves? Or was it something else entirely? These are the questions investigators are trying to answer, and until they do, every shipment connected to the company is going to face extra scrutiny at U.S. ports. That's how food safety investigations work. Isolate the problem, trace it back to the source, and prevent it from happening again. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Radioactive contamination in food isn't something most Americans think about day to day. We hear about E. coli outbreaks in lettuce, salmonella in peanut butter, or listeria in ice cream. But radiation? That's not on the usual list. The truth is, regulatory agencies like the FDA and CBP do monitor for it, precisely because accidents and contamination can happen. For example, after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan in 2011, there was global concern about radioactive materials entering the food chain. This shrimp case isn't anywhere near that scale, but it shows why continued vigilance matters. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Radioactive contamination in food isn't something most Americans think about day to day. We hear about E. coli outbreaks in lettuce, salmonella in peanut butter, or listeria in ice cream. But radiation? That's not on the usual list. The truth is, regulatory agencies like the FDA and CBP do monitor for it, precisely because accidents and contamination can happen. For example, after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan in 2011, there was global concern about radioactive materials entering the food chain. This shrimp case isn't anywhere near that scale, but it shows why continued vigilance matters.